The waitress had barely finished pouring coffee when the entire diner fell silent. Not because someone had shouted, not because a fight had broken out, but because two police officers had walked straight past a dozen occupied tables and stopped only at the black family sitting quietly in the corner booth. The father slowly looked up from his plate. His wife froze, sensing something was wrong before a single word was spoken. Their two children, no older than 10 and 14, exchanged nervous glances. Officer Daniel Briggs rested his hand on his duty belt. "You people mind telling me what you're doing here?" The question made no sense. The family had been eating breakfast for nearly 20 minutes. The bill was already on the table. Other customers looked around in confusion. The father answered calmly, "Having breakfast." Briggs wasn't amused. "Stand up." The father didn't move. "Officer, is there a problem?" His voice stayed perfectly level. Not defensive, not angry, just controlled. The second officer, Ryan Keller, stepped beside the booth. "We've received a report of suspicious individuals matching your description." The restaurant grew even quieter. Several customers immediately looked around. Matching whose description? There were 3 white families eating, 2 elderly couples, a truck driver, 3 construction workers. Yet somehow the only people being questioned were Marcus Johnson, his wife Angela, and their children. Marcus slowly placed his fork on the plate. "I'd be happy to cooperate." He folded his napkin with surprising precision. "But I'd first like to know what crime you believe we've committed." Briggs smirked. "You asking the questions now?" "No," Marcus replied without changing expression. "I'm asking for the reason you're detaining my family." "We're not detaining you." "Then we're free to continue breakfast." The officer's jaw tightened. Angela gently touched Marcus's arm beneath the table. She knew that look. She had seen it before. Not here, not in restaurants. Years ago, before they were married, before the deployments, before the medals. Marcus had learned something during nearly 2 decades in the military. Emotion gave your opponent control. Patience took it away. Officer Keller suddenly leaned over 14-year-old Isaiah. "Empty your pockets." The boy blinked. "What?" "You heard me." Marcus spoke immediately. "My son is a minor. I didn't ask you." "You don't have to," Marcus answered. "I am answering for him." Briggs slammed his palm onto the table. "Listen carefully. We've had reports of a wallet being stolen. There was a black teenager seen near the victim. So we're checking him." The words landed like ice across the restaurant. Someone dropped a fork. A woman sitting nearby whispered, "Oh my God." Isaiah's face turned pale. "I didn't steal anything." Briggs ignored him. "Stand up." Angela finally spoke. "This is ridiculous. My son hasn't even left this booth." "You can explain that later." Marcus looked directly into Briggs' eyes. "For the record, my son has been sitting here since we walked in. The security cameras will confirm that." Neither officer answered. Instead, Keller reached toward Isaiah's hoodie. Marcus stood, not quickly, not aggressively, just enough to place himself between the officer and his son. Every movement was slow, measured, deliberate. The difference in height suddenly became obvious. Marcus stood over 6'3", broad shoulders, straight posture, no visible fear. Officer Briggs instinctively took half a step backward before realizing what he'd done. "You interfering with a police investigation?" "No," Marcus answered. "I'm protecting my child." The words weren't loud, yet somehow everyone heard them. Every customer, every employee, every cook peeking through the kitchen window. Keller reached for his radio. Briggs narrowed his eyes. "You military?" Marcus simply smiled. "Does that matter?" "It might." "I don't think it does." Briggs looked him up and down. Short haircut, perfect posture, scar across one knuckle, calloused hands, old injuries. Something about him looked familiar, but not familiar enough. He dismissed the thought. You carrying a weapon? No. You sure? Very. You got a permit? For what? Briggs leaned closer. You answer every question with another question? Marcus nodded once. When the original question has no legal basis. The waitress standing behind the counter quietly pulled out her phone. She wasn't the only one. Within seconds, 5 different customers had started recording. Briggs noticed. Put those phones away. Nobody moved. You can't record us. A man wearing a business suit spoke from another booth. Actually, in this state, we can. Briggs shot him a furious look. You stay out of this. The businessman shrugged. I'm just stating the law. Marcus remained completely silent. He never looked toward the cameras, never acknowledged them. He simply waited. That made Briggs even angrier. Most people argued, some cried, others apologized. Marcus did none of those things. He just stood there, watching, calculating, almost as if he already knew how this would end. Officer Keller suddenly noticed something clipped inside Marcus's wallet when it briefly shifted from his pocket. What was that? Marcus glanced down. My ID. Let me see it. Am I legally required to identify myself? Briggs answered before Keller could. Yes. Marcus tilted his head slightly. For reasonable suspicion of what specific crime? Silence. 1 second. 2. 3. Briggs finally answered. The theft. What evidence connects me or my family to that theft? More silence. Angela could feel every heartbeat pounding inside her chest. She hated this. Not because she feared Marcus would lose control. She feared he wouldn't. Because she knew exactly what happened when Marcus became this calm. His mind became sharper. Every word became intentional. Every second became part of a larger strategy. Years of special operations had trained him to let opponents expose themselves. The officers didn't realize they were doing exactly that. The restaurant manager finally walked over. Officers, I've reviewed our dining room. This family has been here since 8/11. They haven't left their seats. Briggs didn't even look at him. Go back to work. I'm trying to help. I said, go back to work. The manager hesitated. Marcus spoke before things escalated. It's all right. The manager looked confused. Marcus gave him a subtle nod. Please. The manager reluctantly stepped away. Angela stared at her husband. Why would he stop someone who was trying to defend them? Because Marcus wasn't trying to win an argument. He was allowing every decision the officers made to become visible. Every command, every interruption, every mistake. The cameras were still rolling. A teenager near the front whispered, My live stream has over 8,000 viewers now. Nobody heard him, except Officer Keller. His confidence began slipping. He quietly leaned toward Briggs. Maybe we should wait for the complainant. Briggs ignored him. No. He turned back toward Marcus. Hands behind your back. Gasps echoed across the diner. Angela stood instantly. No! Isaiah instinctively stepped toward his father. His little sister burst into tears. Marcus didn't move. Not an inch. He simply asked one final question. Officer, am I under arrest? Briggs smiled. You are now. The metallic click of handcuffs leaving the officer's belt echoed through the silent diner. And at that exact moment, the front door opened. A tall man wearing civilian clothes stepped inside, stopped in his tracks after recognizing Marcus Johnson, and quietly whispered to himself, They have no idea who they're trying to arrest. The moment the stranger stepped through the entrance, he stopped cold, his eyes locked on Marcus. Not on the officers, not on the frightened children, only on Marcus. Recognition flashed across his face. For a split second, it looked as though he was about to say something. Instead, he remained silent. He reached into his pocket and quietly pulled out his phone. Officer Briggs never noticed. His attention was fixed on Marcus. "I said hands behind your back." Marcus glanced briefly toward his wife. Angela immediately understood. Stay calm. Protect the kids. Nothing more needed to be said. She wrapped one arm around 8-year-old Maya, whose tears were getting harder to control. Isaiah clenched his fists. "Dad," Marcus looked at his son. "Don't." One word. Calm. Firm. Isaiah nodded. He knew that tone. His father had used it exactly once before, during a hurricane evacuation years earlier. When Marcus sounded that calm, everyone listened. Briggs stepped closer. "You think you're smarter than us?" Marcus answered without hesitation. "No. I simply know my rights." The sentence hit Briggs harder than an insult ever could. He grabbed Marcus's wrist. "Enough." Several customers gasped. The businessman who had spoken earlier raised his phone higher. "Officer, the whole interaction is being recorded." Briggs turned toward him. "I don't care." Those 4 words instantly changed the atmosphere. Until now, people had been watching. Now, they were paying attention. The stranger near the entrance quietly finished typing a message. Less than 20 seconds later, he received a reply. He read it once, then twice. His expression became even more serious. Meanwhile, Keller finally looked uncomfortable. He lowered his voice. "Dan, I still don't think we've identified the complainant." Briggs ignored him again. "We've got probable cause." Marcus looked directly at him. "What probable cause?" "You match the description." "What description?" "Blackmail." Silence. The words echoed through the diner. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even Briggs seemed to realize what he had just admitted. A woman near the counter slowly lowered her coffee cup. An elderly veteran sitting alone quietly shook his head. The waitress whispered under her breath, "Did he really just say that?" Marcus didn't react. He simply asked another question. "Is race alone your probable cause?" Briggs hesitated, only for a second, but everyone saw it. Keller saw it too. His breathing became noticeably heavier. The cameras caught everything. Marcus extended his wrists without resistance. "If you're placing me under arrest, I will not resist." Briggs almost looked disappointed. He had expected shouting or pushing, anything that would justify force. Instead, Marcus remained completely cooperative. The handcuffs clicked shut, metal against metal. Maya burst into tears. "Daddy!" Marcus immediately turned toward her. "It's okay." His voice hadn't changed. Not even slightly. "I'm all right." Angela swallowed hard. She knew he wasn't talking only to Maya. He was talking to her, to Isaiah, to everyone watching. Stay calm. Let the truth catch up. Officer Keller began searching Marcus. Wallet, phone, keys, nothing else. No weapon. Briggs frowned. "Check again." Keller did. Still nothing. Then he opened Marcus's wallet. Inside were ordinary credit cards, family photos, health insurance, driver's license. Nothing unusual. Until one dark blue identification card slipped halfway into view. Keller froze. "What is this?" Marcus remained silent. Briggs snatched the card before Keller could read it completely. He glanced at it for less than a second. Military. That's all he noticed. He shoved it back into the wallet. "Doesn't matter." The stranger by the entrance quietly muttered, "Big mistake." He was already walking toward the manager. "Can I borrow your office for 1 minute?" The manager nodded immediately. Both disappeared into the hallway. Briggs looked around the dining room. "Anyone interfering with this arrest will be charged." Nobody moved. Nobody needed to. The cameras kept recording. Outside, a police cruiser pulled into the parking lot, then another. Keller looked relieved. Back up. But when the vehicle stopped, neither officer recognized the man who stepped out of the lead SUV. He wasn't wearing a patrol uniform. Dark suit, silver badge on his belt, calm expression. He didn't rush. He simply entered the diner. The room naturally parted as he walked inside. He stopped beside Briggs. "What's going on?" Briggs answered confidently. "Routine arrest." "For?" "Possible theft." "Evidence?" Briggs hesitated. "Witness description." The suited official looked around. "Where's the witness?" Nobody answered. The manager returned from the hallway. "So far, no witness has identified this family." Briggs looked irritated. "We're still investigating." The suited man nodded slowly. "And yet, you've already handcuffed him." No response. The official turned toward Marcus. "Sir, have these officers informed you that you're under arrest?" Marcus answered calmly. "They informed me after I asked whether I was free to leave." "What exact charge?" "They haven't specified one." The official looked back at Briggs. "Officer?" Briggs shifted his weight. "We're sorting that out." The silence that followed was painful. Even Keller couldn't look anyone in the eye anymore. Then, the office door opened again. The stranger who had entered earlier stepped out holding a tablet. "I've reviewed every interior camera." He handed it to the suited official. The family entered together. They sat immediately. They never approached any other table. They never interacted with the alleged victim. They never left this booth. The official watched nearly 3 minutes of footage, frame by frame. Nobody spoke. Briggs stared at the floor. Keller swallowed hard. Finally, the official looked up. "Remove the handcuffs." Briggs didn't move. "Officer, I gave you an order." Reluctantly, Briggs unlocked one cuff, then the other. Marcus slowly rubbed his wrists but said nothing. Not one complaint, not one angry word. The official extended his hand. "My name is Deputy Chief Robert Hayes." Marcus shook it politely. "Marcus Johnson." Hayes studied him for a moment. "You've remained remarkably composed." Marcus gave a faint smile. "I've had good training." Before Hayes could ask another question, the stranger finally spoke. "Sir, I believe you should read the back of his military identification." Hayes looked confused. Marcus sighed quietly. There really isn't any need. But Hayes had already taken the card. He flipped it over. His expression changed instantly. He looked at Marcus again, then back at the card, then once more at Marcus. "You served with Naval Special Warfare?" Marcus nodded once. "For 18 years. The entire diner fell silent again. Briggs' face lost its color. Keller's mouth slowly fell open. But Marcus wasn't finished. He looked directly at Deputy Chief Hayes. "I'd appreciate it if we remember that none of this should depend on what's written on that card. My family deserved the same respect before anyone knew who I was." No one in the diner could argue with that. And for the first time since the officers walked through the door, even Deputy Chief Hayes had no immediate response. For nearly 10 seconds, no one in the diner spoke. Deputy Chief Robert Hayes still held Marcus Johnson's military identification in his hand. But Marcus's final sentence lingered in the room far longer than the silence. My family deserved the same respect before anyone knew who I was. Hayes slowly nodded. You're right. Then he turned toward Officers Briggs and Keller. Both of you. My office. Now. Neither officer moved. Briggs looked as though he wanted to explain himself. There has to be some misunderstanding. Hayes cut him off. The misunderstanding began the moment you decided a family eating breakfast looked more suspicious than the facts. The words landed like a hammer. The customers who had watched everything unfold remained perfectly still. No one celebrated, no one applauded. The moment was too serious for that. Hayes looked toward the manager. Sir, do you have the surveillance footage saved? I've already backed it up. Good. Don't erase anything. He turned to the businessman who had recorded almost the entire incident. Would you be willing to provide your video? Absolutely. Another customer raised her hand. I recorded from the moment they approached the table. So did I. And me. Within seconds, 6 different people stepped forward. Briggs finally realized what had happened. This wasn't one person's word against another anymore. The entire diner had become a room full of witnesses. Hayes looked at Keller. Did you identify the complainant before placing Mr. Johnson in handcuffs? Keller hesitated. No, sir. Did anyone positively identify this family? No. Did surveillance place them near the alleged theft? No. Were any stolen items found during your search? No, sir. Each answer became quieter than the last. Hayes didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The facts were speaking for themselves. Then the front door opened once again. An elderly man hurried inside, visibly out of breath. I called about my wallet. Everyone turned. Hayes stepped toward him. Are you the complainant? Yes. The man looked around the restaurant in confusion. My wallet wasn't stolen. Every eye shifted to Briggs. The elderly man continued. I left it in my truck. I found it under the driver's seat. Silence. Complete silence. I came back because dispatch said officers were still here. He finally noticed Marcus, then Angela, then the children. His face turned pale. Oh no. They aren't the people I described. Hayes folded his arms. What description did you give? I said, I thought I saw a teenager in a gray hoodie walking toward the parking lot. He pointed toward Isaiah. But that's not him. The boy I saw was white. Several people gasped. The old man looked horrified. I never mentioned race. I never accused this family. I just reported that I couldn't find my wallet. Hayes slowly turned toward Briggs. Anything you'd like to add? Briggs stared at the floor. No, sir. For the first time that morning, the confident officer looked genuinely afraid. Hayes spoke calmly. Officer Daniel Briggs, Officer Ryan Keller, turn over your service weapons. The entire diner froze. Both officers looked stunned. Sir? Immediately. Neither argued. One after the other, they removed their duty weapons and placed them on the nearest table. Hayes continued. Your badges. More silence. Then came the unmistakable sound of metal hitting wood. 2 badges. 2 careers hanging by a thread. You are relieved of duty pending an internal affairs investigation. Briggs finally looked at Marcus. The word never became a sentence. Marcus didn't ask for an apology. He didn't demand revenge. He simply watched. Hayes addressed another arriving supervisor. Escort them outside. The officers walked past the same customers they had ignored only minutes earlier. No one said a word. That silence was louder than any insult. Once they disappeared through the front door, the tension inside the diner finally broke. Maya ran into her father's arms. Marcus hugged her tightly. It's over. She buried her face against his shoulder. I was scared. I know. You did nothing wrong. Isaiah stood nearby, trying not to cry. Marcus reached out and pulled him into the embrace. You too. Angela finally exhaled. It felt like she had been holding her breath for an hour. Hayes approached the family. Mr. Johnson, I owe you an apology. Marcus shook his head gently. You don't owe me one. The department does. Hayes accepted the correction. You're right. And you'll receive one. Marcus looked around the diner. Every phone was still recording. Every face was waiting for him to say something. He could have listed his medals. He could have talked about combat, about classified missions, about everything he had sacrificed for his country. Instead, he looked at Isaiah. When people judge you before they know you, you have two choices. You can become the person they expect, or you can become the reason they're forced to question themselves. Isaiah nodded slowly. Marcus continued. I wore this country's uniform for 18 years. I've served beside people from every race, every religion, and every background imaginable. Out there, nobody asked what color your skin was before trusting you with their life. They only cared whether you'd come home together. The room remained silent. Not because people were uncomfortable, because they were listening. Marcus looked at Hayes. My military record shouldn't have changed today's outcome. If I were a mechanic, a teacher, a truck driver, or unemployed, the law should have protected my family exactly the same way. Hayes lowered his head. I couldn't agree more. The elderly man who had misplaced his wallet slowly walked toward Marcus. His hands trembled. I'm so sorry. Marcus offered him a warm smile. You didn't do this. The old man looked relieved, though tears filled his eyes. I should have stayed until they arrived. Maybe I could have stopped this. Marcus placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. What's important is that you came back. Outside, television news vans had already begun arriving. Someone had uploaded the videos. Millions of people would soon watch what happened inside that little diner. But Marcus wasn't thinking about headlines. He looked at his family. Let's finish breakfast. Angela laughed through her tears. Our food's cold. The waitress who had quietly watched everything unfold smiled for the first time all morning. Not anymore. She carried 4 fresh plates from the kitchen. This one's on the house. Marcus reached for his wallet. I appreciate it, but we'll pay. She shook her head. No. The food is free. What happened here should never cost your family another dollar. Marcus smiled. Then leave the bill. And let me tip the people who treated us with kindness? The waitress laughed softly. I think we can arrange that. As the family sat back down, the rest of the diners slowly returned to their own meals. Conversations resumed. Coffee was poured again. Plates clinked. Life moved forward. But no one in that restaurant would ever forget the lesson they had witnessed. True strength wasn't shown when Marcus revealed who he was. It had been visible long before anyone knew his name. It was there when he refused to lose his temper, when he protected his children without raising his voice, when he demanded accountability instead of revenge, and when he reminded an entire room that justice should never depend on a uniform, a rank, a medal, or the color of someone's skin. Sometimes the strongest person in the room isn't the one who can end a fight. It's the one who knows exactly when not to start one. And that morning, in a small roadside diner, a father taught that lesson without ever raising his voice.